Okay, we're continuing with Chapter 2 in The Talking Wire, The Story of Alexander Graham Bell by O.J. Stevenson. This is Chapter 2, A Very Intelligent Dog. The Bell family were teachers of speech. Grandpapa Bell, who lived in London, and his two sons, Uncle David, who taught at the university at Dublin, and Alec's father, Professor Alexander Melville Bell, who lived in Edinburgh. In Professor Bell's family, there were 3 children, Melville James, Melly, Alec, and Edward Charles, Ted. The 3 bright, lovable boys. Their mother was a woman with unusual gifts. She was a skilled painter of miniatures and gave lessons in painting. In spite of the handicap of deafness, she excelled as a pianist, and after the death of Signor Bertini, Alec's music teacher, she herself taught the boy, and in addition to these accomplishments, she was always actively interested in everything that her husband and her sons did. So did you hear that? It was our main character we're calling Alec, and his name is Alexander Graham Bell, but we're calling him Alec as he's a boy, and it says his mother was deaf. So that's very interesting, isn't it? I think they mentioned that in the last chapter, didn't they? Besides the boys and their parents, there was another member of the household who must not be forgotten, the little dog who bore the odd name of Mr. Purd. He was a little black Skye Terrier with a spot of white on his breast, a long body and short legs and long hair that straggled down over his eyes. Purd belonged to the family, but he was Alec's special care. And the 2 of them went everywhere together. It was Alec who fed him and combed his long hair and taught him all he knew. He soon learned all the common tricks to beg and shake hands and to lie down and be a, quote, dead dog. That means pretend, looked like he was dead, right? South Charlotte Street, where the Bells lived, was not the best place for either a boy or a dog. The house was gloomy and the street was noisy, and they spent as much time as they could at a cottage, Milton Cottage by name, in the open country near Edinburgh. There, in the long summer afternoons, Alec undertook to teach Purd something new. Since their father was an expert in curing persons of defective speech, that means they couldn't speak well, the boys heard a good deal about the use of the tongue and lips and vocal cords in speaking. This set Alec thinking, and one day he said to his father, "Papa, why can't Purd speak?" "The real reason why he doesn't," said Professor Bell, "is that he hasn't anything to say. He speaks with his ears and his eyes and his tail, and he knows how to beg, and when there is anything exciting going on, he barks or growls or whines, and sometimes he rushes around as if he had gone completely out of his mind. He understands what you mean when you say scat to him, but he can't say scat to you. He doesn't need to." Do you use that word scat? Mimi doesn't usually use it, but sometimes I do, or I might. It would mean like, get out of here. "Well," said Alec, "I wish he'd say something. There's Mrs. Jones's parrot. He can talk, and he's not half so smart as our dog. Couldn't we teach Purd 1 or 2 words?" "No, I don't think so," said Professor Bell, "but you may try if you want. Teach him to stand on his hind legs and growl. That'll do to begin with. When he growls ever so little, give him a biscuit or something else that is good to eat. If you do that often enough, by and by he'll do nothing but growl. If you feed him and praise him when he does well, you won't have much trouble, but you have to be patient with the dog until he finds out what you really want. But I've forgotten the most important thing after all. What does he say when he growls? What does it sound like? Is it O or ah or E, or is it something else?" "It sounds more like ah than anything else," said Alec. "Ah, ah, ah." He just keeps on saying ah. "Now then," said Professor Bell, "that's enough for one lesson, but make him keep on growling and don't feed him unless he does." The next time that Mr. Purd had a lesson, Professor Bell was the schoolmaster. As soon as Purd began to growl, Mr. Bell took hold of the dog's muzzle, that's his mouth or his nose together, and opened and closed the jaws 3 or 4 times, one after the other. "Listen," he said to Alec. "What's he saying now?" "He's saying, 'Mama, Mama,'" said Alec. Now then, said Professor Bell, you try it. Don't be afraid. He won't bite. He wants that cake. That's all. Now make him do it again. A dog doesn't learn very quickly. He has to get the idea, and he has to say it over and over and over the way you do with your Latin. Latin's another language, isn't it? Latin, laughed Melly, who happened to come up just then. How do you learn your Latin, Alec? Amo, amas, amat. You ought to get an extra piece of cake for that. Alec said nothing, but gave his brother a withering glance. One thing at a time, said Professor Bell. Don't give up too easily. Give him lots of practice. He must get used to it. And remember, no growl, no cake. The next lesson was harder, and Purd didn't like it and growled all the louder. I want to shut the air off, said Professor Bell, just the way you shut the water off a tap. I'll show you how to do it. Press up on his throat between the lower jaw bones while he was growling and make him say, ga, ga, ga. Here, Melly, your turn now, over and over and over the way you learned your Latin. That'll need some practice. When he has learned that, come back to me again. There is just one lesson more. The last lesson wasn't so easy either, but Alec soon learned what to do. The dog's lips had to be held together, narrowed and rounded, so that he made the sound ow or ow. That took practice and extra biscuits, but by and by the little dog growled through the narrow opening and said ow in a good style. And now that Mr. Purd had learned a new kind of alphabet, the boys tried to put these different sounds together to see if they would make sense. And after trying this arrangement and that without success, they finally made up a sort of a sentence that did say something. It wasn't dog Latin or dog roll, and it sounded like baby talk, but with a good imagination you could make out something like this. Oh, ah, ooh, ga, mama, or in other words, how are you, grandmama? It was, of course, all very childish, but it answered Alec's question whether a dog could learn to speak. That's all, said Alec's father. It isn't even dog language, but there isn't another thing that we can do. But Alec wasn't satisfied and kept on drilling Purd on these sounds until he could say them almost as fast as Alec could move his fingers. Purd, of course, didn't know anything about Grandmama, and he thought all the time that he was saying, come on with your cake. Poor Purd made another sad mistake. He seemed to think that he could ask about Grandmama's health without the help of Alec, but no matter how hard he tried, he got the sounds all mixed up. He couldn't say oh-ah-ooh by himself any more than Alec could speak Greek. In the meantime, Purd was becoming quite famous. You can't have a dog that talks without the neighbors knowing all about it. Visitors came from far and near to see him, and they all agreed that he was a very intelligent dog. That's the end of Chapter 2 in Part 1. Part 1 is called Boyhood Days, and that was the end of Chapter 2 called A Very Intelligent Dog.